the CME program conducted by the Institutional Academic Committee, Platinum Jubilee, and the SCBM. It is indeed a privilege on my part to welcome you all here. Professor Rakikar, Professor Vibhudendu Pati, Professor Parida, who is the moderator today, all my faculty colleagues of all the departments, participant, I again welcome you to this pre-Platinum Jubilee CME. It is indeed an honor that the SCB is celebrating the Platinum Jubilee this year. These functions will culminate to the main function on 26th, 27th, and 28th of November. I extend a hearty welcome and extend my invitation that all the speakers and alumni inside the state and outside the state are welcome to participate and join in the Platinum Jubilee and SCBM Global Conclave from 26th to 28th November. I would mention briefly, you are all aware about SCB Medical College, nothing much to say about. I would apprise briefly that the CME program is conducted to mark the academic progress and excellence of SCB over the last 75 or 77 years. And we are going to a mega expansion. So naturally, since the vision of Honorable Chief Minister to make it one of the best world-class hospital facility, in that line, we thought Platinum Jubilee will be a landmark in enhancement academically. My few requests to speakers, so kindly confine within 20 minutes and give 10 minutes for our interaction so that the participation becomes more and more fruitful as well. My request to all the faculties and staff of SCB that only one question can be asked, not beyond, so that we will be very confined to the time that is allotted. And please do not have any prelude. When you ask a question, if you have a point, please ask the question directly. Don't have prelude, don't congratulate somebody, don't compliment somebody. If you have anything knowledge better than what the speaker has told, just add that. But there is no prelude. That is what my appeal should be. So I hand over to Professor Parida, the HOD of Immunohematology and Blood Transfusion, the present name, but still we are continuing with the Transfusion Medicine Department. Professor Parida, please.
Respected Dean and Principal, SCB Medical College and Hospital, Professor Dr. Dharteshwar Hota, respected Speaker Dr. Rakikar, Professor of Pathology, JIPMER, Puducherry, respected Speaker Dr. Vibhudendu Pati, Professor and Head of Department, Department of Transfusion Medicine, Institute of Medical Science and Sama Hospital, Bhubaneswar, respected Moderator Dr. Priyanka Samar, Professor and HOD, Department of Clinical Hematology, IMS and Sama Hospital, Bhubaneswar, respected Moderator Dr. Ravindra Kumar Misra, Professor and HOD, Department of Transfusion Medicine, MKCG Medical College, Barampur, respected all senior and junior faculty members and esteemed participants, I am privileged to conduct this pre-Platinum Jubilee CME of SCBNs as Professor and HOD of Department of Transfusion Medicine, SCB MCS Cuttack. Now, our CME first speaker is Dr. Rakikar. He is Professor, Department of Pathology of JIPMER, Puducherry. She has 16 years of experience in teaching and research. Her area of interest is hemostasis, hemoglobinopathies, laboratory quality management, hematolymphatic biopsy. She is involved in several research projects, including 101 journal publications. She has received 9 gold medals in MBBS and bronze medal in MD examinations. At present, she is Vice President of Indian Society of Hematology and Blood Transfusion. She is Secretary cum Treasurer of Pondicherry Chapter of ISHPT. She is also Associate Editor of 3 reputed hematological journals. She is alumna of this college. She has passed MBBS from SCB Medical College, Cuttack, Odisha. She has done MD Pathology in PGI in Chandigarh. She has completed DM Hematopathology from AIIMS, New Delhi. Our topic of discussion is mesenchymal stem cell therapy in Management of COVID-19, and which will be moderated by Professor Dr. Priyanka Samar, Professor and HOD, Department of Clinical Hematology, IMS Samvastra, Bhubaneswar.
But I have got only appeal to all of you, please confine within 20 minutes.
Now we'll go to past speaker. Dr. Rakhi Gara requested to deliver his speech.
Thank you, sir, for the warm introduction. And am I audible?
Yes.
And screen is shared now?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you so much. So, warm greetings from my institution, JIPMER, to my esteemed and cherished alma mater, SCB Medical College, Cuttack. This is indeed an honor for me today to be speaking to all of you. And as already mentioned, I'll be speaking on mesenchymal stem cell therapy in management of COVID-19. The layout plan of my talk over the next 20 minutes will be a brief summary about the pathogenesis of COVID-19, then the concept of mesenchymal stem cells, then we will go over to the use of mesenchymal stem cells in COVID-19. We'll look through some ongoing and published studies, and finally, in the concluding section, what is the insight that we have gained and what are the concerns regarding this stem cell therapy. So, a pandemic that has shaken the world. COVID-19 pandemic has grown to become a major global health crisis. While treatment strategies continue to evolve and vaccines have come into the fray, yet there continues to be critical cases requiring intensive hospital care. The agent SARS-CoV-2 belongs to the cluster of beta coronavirus of the order Nidovirales, and it is the third zoonotic disease caused by this type of virus after SARS and the Middle East respiratory syndrome. As we all know, coronavirus is an enveloped RNA virus, and it has a spike protein, membrane protein and envelope on the surface and a nucleocapsid core with the RNA viral genome. So briefly, the entry of the organism into the host is through the respiratory tract, and this virus, mainly the protein here you can see is the spike protein, which engages with the ACE2 receptor, and this is facilitated by the stem press and furin peptides on the surface of the alveolar epithelial cell, which facilitates the entry of the virus into the respiratory epithelium. After this, the virus undergoes multiplication and assembly and is released. These viral peptides actually are engulfed by the dendritic cells, and these peptides in turn will activate the immune system, the T helper cells, which will activate cytotoxic T cells and B cell arm. The B cells would produce neutralizing antibodies, and the cytotoxic T cells would lead to clearance of the viral infected cells. This would happen in normal cases. Actually, unlike other innocuous viral infections where a lot of viral specific interferons lead to clearance, here already the immune system is activated, but in mild cases this would be enough to keep it at bay. However, the main pathogenesis in the moderate to severe cases is because of a dysfunctional immune response, which leads to a hyperinflammatory state, which we know as cytokine storm. So as we all know, the virus can activate multiple parts of the immune system, multiple effector cells, leading to a torrential outpouring of cytokines, which lead to multi-organ dysfunction syndrome and ultimately leading to the demise of the patient. So the lung actually faces the brunt of injury in COVID-19, and as we can see here, the lung here, we can see that there is increased vasopermeability leading to pulmonary edema. The sloughing of the alveolar epithelial cells and fibrin strands lead to formation of hyaline membrane leading to diffuse alveolar damage, which clinically manifests as ARDS. And as the cascade progresses further, it leads to a prothrombotic state. And we can see here that this is mainly because of widespread endothelial damage, which leads to the dysfunctional endothelium releasing procoagulants and also the activation of the immune system, which leads to cytokine storm and multi-organ damage. Also facilitates the exposure of tissue factor, which predisposes to hypercoagulability. Neutrophils, which are also activated, exposed neutrophil extracellular traps lead to platelet activation, and this in turn leads to thrombosis. So it is a multifactorial cascade of events which can be summarized as a pulmonary phase, where it is the interface between the virus and host. This progresses to a pro-inflammatory phase or cytokine storm, which is a host response, and then this leads to a prothrombotic state. So while therapy has shown advancement and it is directed as at not just um, management of the symptoms but also antiviral and reducing the inflammatory response, but still the disease itself is so enigmatic, and this has led to the evolution of novel therapeutic strategies, and into this fray has come mesenchymal stromal cells. So with this, we go on to the next part of the talk, which is a brief concept about mesenchymal stem cells. So what are stem cells? As we all know, these are cells which have unlimited capacity for self-renewal on one hand, and on the other hand, they have a capacity to differentiate into various types of lineages, and that depending on that, the potency of the stem cell is said to be either a totipotent stem cell, which is basically an embryonic stem cell, or the fertilized ova or zygote. Then we have pluripotent stem cells, which are basically from the blastocyst, which can generate all three germ cell layers. After that, we have multipotent cells, which actually have differentiation capacity along a particular lineage. And finally, we have unipotent stem cells, like we see in the intestinal epithelial cells. So how did this term mesenchymal stem cell come into picture? So the first documented experiments were by Alexander Friedenstein in mid 1960s and 1980s, when he observed that mouse bone marrow and other blood forming organs contain progenitor cells that can give rise in culture to fibroblast as well as other mesodermal cells. The term mesenchymal stem cells was coined by Kaplan in 1991, who drew a parallel with the stem cells at the origin of mesodermal tissue in the embryo. And he was the first one to grow these cells from human tissues. So that is how mesenchymal stem cells came to be recognized as stem cells, which are at the root of origin of all mesodermal tissue. So as we know today, these are heterogeneous subset of stromal cells which are isolated from many fetal and adult tissue. So this could be from the Wharton's jelly, fetal blood, placenta, amniotic membrane in the fetus, and in adults from adipose tissue, bone marrow, dental pulp, endometrium. So all these can be the source of these stromal cells, which are non-hematopoietic, and they express a distinct type of CD markers like CD 105, 106, 44, 71, 73, and they do not express hematopoietic stem cell markers. So these are a distinct subset of cells other than hematopoietic stem cells. And as we have understood, these are multipotent, and the main lineage of differentiation is along the mesoderm, but they have a limited transdifferentiation capacity and can generate some epithelial cells as well. So the unique feature of this mesenchymal stem cell is their immunologic characteristics. The immune phenotype of mesenchymal stem cells is widely described as MHC class 1 positive, MHC class 2 negative. And this is why they are regarded as non-immunogenic, because MHC class 1 may activate T cells, but with the absence of other co-stimulatory molecules, a secondary signal would not engage, leaving the T cells anergic. So, transplantation into an allogenic host may not require immunosuppression. Apart from this, that these cells are more or less non-immunogenic, mesenchymal stem cells has very powerful immunomodulatory activity. So here we can see that these are the red ones are the mesenchymal stromal cells, and they can crosstalk with a host of other immune cells by both juxtacrine as well as paracrine signaling. So they can be in juxtaposition with the cells as well as release their mediators, which is called the secretome. And with the release of these regulatory cytokines, it can downregulate the immune response from a pro-inflammatory state to a regulatory phenotype. So apart from the secretome, which has a powerful anti-inflammatory and immunomodulatory activity, mesenchymal stem cells also produce some growth factors like vascular endothelial growth factor, which is pro-angiogenic, and it also has some capacity for re-epithelialization by production of hepatocyte growth factor and insulin-like growth factor. It also improves extracellular matrix production and modeling. So as you can see, what we understand is this mesenchymal stem cells are itself non-immunogenic. They have immunomodulatory properties and they have pro-angiogenic and re-epithelialization properties. So the role of mesenchymal stem cells in regenerative medicine has been explored in various neurological disorders, endocrinopathies, and bone and cartilage disease. But there are certain concerns regarding mesenchymal stem cell therapy. That is, that in culture, there may be chromosomal instability with more passaging, and they have been postulated that sometimes they can promote cancer pathogenesis. Stem cell therapy also comes under the scrutiny of regulatory bodies to minimize unapproved and unproven therapies. But realizing the pandemic as a time-sensitive matter, there has been clearance of studies of mesenchymal stem cells in COVID-19, as you will realize from the number of clinical trials which are ongoing in this regard. So with this, we come to the end of the second part. Now we go on to the utility of mesenchymal stem cells in COVID-19. So the most important aspect of COVID, which is why this mesenchymal stem cell therapy was explored, is the cytokine storm. Mesenchymal stem cells have powerful anti-inflammatory and immunomodulatory properties. So they have the potential to attenuate the cytokine storm and have been proposed as a potential therapeutic approach. Apart from that also, the IV infusion of mesenchymal stem cells results in significant trapping in the lung. Hence, this therapy could directly mitigate lung damage. So this is a pictorial representation showing that mesenchymal stem cells have potential in all the various organs which can be infected. They have priming and immunomodulatory activity. And this was one of the earliest letters to the editor, where the authors had postulated that apart from mesenchymal stem cells homing into the lung, which we already described, and their cytokines which have a powerful immunomodulatory effect, they also lead to death of these immunoreactive T cells. So now our understanding has grown, and in this picture we can just try to understand how these mesenchymal stem cells are useful in COVID-19. So in the first picture, what we can see is the mesenchymal stem cells actually inhibit the Th1 and Th17 phenotype of T helper cells, and they skew the macrophage response from M1 to M2 type. This M2 type has anti-inflammatory cytokines which are produced like interleukin 10 and TGF beta, and this helps in regeneration and repair of the epithelial, the alveolar epithelial cells. And the next thing is apart from their action on the T helper mesenchymal stem cells, will not activate the native T cells. And apart from that, by IDO or indolamine dioxide, these can also induce death of the cells. And as I already mentioned, the T cells are of the T regulatory cells. Apart from this, they also help in increasing the angiogenesis and restoring oxygen supply. So these are the proposed mechanisms by which these mesenchymal stem cells have benefit in COVID-19. So what are the sources of mesenchymal stem cells? For patients with COVID-19, umbilical cord mesenchymal stem cells have gained more attention because they have a higher concentration of stem cells compared with bone marrow, have a faster doubling time, and these are a byproduct during delivery which does not require invasive procedure, and these cells are also more immune tolerant because of low expression of MHC class 1 and no expression of MHC class 2. Apart from this, the other source which has been explored is adipose tissue derived mesenchymal stem cells. This is because these are easily accessible site for extraction with minimum discomfort to the donor, and it is comparatively easy to isolate mesenchymal stem cells from harvested adipose tissue. Higher fraction can be extracted and a higher success rate in isolating mesenchymal stem cells from adipose tissue than umbilical cord. So most of the studies that are ongoing or registered, this is from a recent publication in June 2021, which actually has summarized the recently published phase 1 and 2 clinical trials on the safety and efficacy of mesenchymal stem cells. And all am I audible of
Yes,
mesenchymal
now
stem cells?
audible.
Okay. So we'll just go through two studies which on the utility of this mesenchymal stem cell in COVID-19. The first study which
Your
I've chosen,
slide is unshare in between. Just
should
share
I
it.
go?
Just
Should I
share
go
it.
back? Is it okay now?
No, not it is not seen, man.
Okay.
Unshare. Next share again, man. Share and share again.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry for this interruption. So I will resume from this slide, and this is once. one study where this is a study from USA on mesenchymal umbilical cord mesenchymal stem cell and a double-blind phase 1 to randomized control trial, and this actually had two arms. One is the control group of 12 patients and a case group which had 12 patients. The intervention given was 2 IV infusions of umbilical cord mesenchymal stem cells at a dose of 100 million cells per infusion given 72 hours apart. And there are studies which have given doses of in kg, and here it is given in absolute numbers. Both the control and the stem cell arm were age and gender matched, and their clinical profile at presentation were comparable. The primary endpoint of the study was basically safety of the infusion product and any infusion associated adverse events within 6 hours from infusion. And secondary endpoints were related to the clinical outcomes after 28 days of treatment. And in this study, they found that the number of subjects with serious adverse events was less in the mesenchymal stem cell treated group compared to controls, which was statistically significant. So with this, the authors have concluded that the number of serious adverse events in the treatment group was less compared to controls, and it was useful in mitigating the cytokine storm. This is another study which has been published in 2021 in Journal of Intensive Care Medicine. It is from Germany, and here the mesenchymal stem cell group had 5 patients. Compared to the control group, the age of the patients in the stem cell group was lower, significantly lower, but these patients had a more severe lung involvement at presentation. The source was from a blood bank in Frankfurt, and they have given the details of how the stem cells were prepared, and the outcome showed that the ICU mortality was less in the treated group compared to the control group, and the lung injury showed significant improvement in the stem cell treated group as evidenced by the Mores score at admission. Compared to the controls, there was significant decline. So with this, they have concluded that mesenchymal stem cell infusion was safe and improved pulmonary function in severe form of COVID-19. So these are just few examples. So what is the insight into reviving COVID-19 induced lung damage via mesenchymal stem cells? So this is the concluding part. So to make it more impactful, let us just see the histopathological findings in lung in COVID-19. There are basically 3 histological patterns of lung injury, which we can easily correlate with the pathogenesis that we already talked about. So there is a epithelial pattern, a vascular pattern, and a fibrotic pattern of damage. In the epithelial pattern of lung injury, there is edema, congestion, followed by hyaline membrane, squamous metaplasia, chronic interstitial pneumonitis. There can be multinucleated giant cells with intracytoplasmic inclusions and intrapulmonary megakaryocytes. Then we have a vascular pattern of lung injury with fibrin thrombi in the pulmonary vasculature and perivascular lymphocytic infiltrate. And finally, it culminates in a fibrotic pattern of lung injury with fibroblastic proliferation and fine septal collagen deposition. So, recent studies of mesenchymal stem cells in COVID-19 have provided evidence that mesenchymal stem cells promote lung tissue healing and regeneration. Once injected IV, mesenchymal stromal cells to a large extent accumulate in the lung and exhibit an immunomodulatory by protecting the alveolar epithelial cells. So what are the concerns of use of mesenchymal stromal cells in COVID-19. Now, what we have seen are preliminary data, and these are based on compassionate use of mesenchymal stem cells, and results from several other clinical trials which are registered are still pending. Then there was a concern whether these mesenchymal stem cells themselves express this ACE2 and TMPRSS2, which would facilitate the viral entry into them. But later studies have shown that they do not express it. So the stem cells themselves do not get infected.
Madam, can I request you to make it little shorter because we have exceeded 25 minutes.
Yes,
Another
sir.
speaker
It
is there.
is the
Please.
last slide.
Yeah, please. Thank you.
And commercialization and abuse by unauthorized stem cell clinics. It's not a readily available resource in developing countries. High cost and technical challenges and immediate adverse effects from stem cell infusion. However, again, the studies, the clinical trials which are already published have shown that it has been relatively safe with less number of adverse events reported. So we can conclude that it is a tool which holds promise. So thank you again for this opportunity and for your patient hearing. Be happy to take any questions.
Yeah. Thank you,
I think-
Didi. Dr. Rakhi, that was a very vivid description, and the pathogenesis, whichever you have alluded, was extremely helpful and knowledgeable. And just I would like to make a remark over here that the plasma therapy, which was into a lot of, it was the buzz of the town when we had last time COVID first wave. This time mesenchymal stem cells have had a new entry into the armamentarium, and this is like a repurposed drug. And that was possibly because of the high severity we had this time.
Yes.
Last time the severity we had in the first phase was relatively less, but this time the mortality was mesenchymal stem cells having this immunomodulatory effect will definitely have a positive impact in giving some amount of hope to the patients who are on ventilator.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was a pleasant listening to you.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka.
Thank you, Vivi. Over to the moderators, please. Organizers and the moderators of the session.
Questions, if any, can be raised to chat box.
Sir, I am not able to see the questions in the chat box. If somebody can read it aloud, definitely we will have inputs from Dr. Rakhi.
Okay, we'll go to question after two sessions. Now, I request our second speaker, Dr. Vibhudan Dupati, and who is professor and Department of Transfusion Medicine, IMS and some hospital, Bhubaneswar. Previously, he worked as founder and HOD of Transfusion Medicine, Department of SCB MCS Kotak in the year 2012 and 13. He has worked for more than 1 decade in different capacities, finally as director in Center Red Cross Blood Bank Kotak, which is the largest blood bank of the state of Odisha, where he established apheresis unit, thalassemia day care unit, and blood component separation unit for the first time in Odisha. He has undergone training in different primary institutes of countries such as IHBT Department, PGIMS Chandigarh, IIIH Mumbai, AIMS New Delhi, Rajiv Gandhi Cancer Institute New Delhi, Apollo Gringar Hospital Kolkata. He has teaching experience of more than 8 years as professor in transfusion medicine. Besides, he has teaching experience of more than 30 years in the pathology in different government medical colleges Odisha, including our institute. Now, he will speak on blood donation during COVID, and which will be moderated by Professor Ravindra Kumar Mishra, Professor and HOD of the Transfusion Department of the MKCG Medical College, Barampur. I welcome Dr. Vibhudan.
Good evening, good afternoon to Professor Gupta, Dean, and Dr. Corrida. My topic is blood donation in the COVID pandemic. Now, this is a new challenge to the blood bank that COVID has caused. Next, please.
Così così.
About the pandemic itself, it's very brief. So, as we all know, it's a worldwide new spread of a new disease, but the WHO has told, or an epidemic occurring worldwide, or very worldwide area which crosses international boundaries, affecting large number of people. This 31st December, this was reported from Wuhan, not as COVID, and finally on the 7th of January 1920, they reported this is due to the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And on the 11th of March 2020, WHO declared this finally as a pandemic. So we are only 15 months into this COVID pandemic, and the first case in India being reported on the 30th of January 2020. Next. So there is one point is people are very scared that probably during COVID, if we go to blood bank or take a blood component transfusion, we may get infected. So this I want to very clearly say that there has been no clear evidence of blood-borne transmission. That is a Chinese study. The Korean Red Cross Blood Transfusion Services also did a study on this, and they didn't confirm COVID infection in the blood transfusion recipients. They have received components from infected donors. And here I can clarify that most of the world, they do not do a pre-donation testing for COVID. So it is after donation only, and when the donor reports that he has some flu-like symptom, he is tested, and then we come to know that a infected component has already been transfused. And a retrospective study in China, they studied about 4,995 healthy blood donors, and only 4 were found to be carrying evidence of COVID virus. Next. The COVID pandemic has affected the blood transfusion service in the different ways, right from donor shortages and then increase in the wastage of blood, because whatever blood components are stocked in the blood bank, suddenly the demand after the pandemic, routine planned surgeries, all this, they dropped, and that caused a good number of wastage in different blood banks. A significant reduction in blood donation is observed during previous viral outbreak, that is the past experience. During the SARS epidemic in 2003, there is a 60% decline in blood donation in Singapore. Similarly, during the influenza pandemic in 2009, 10 to 30% fewer blood donation were occurred during worldwide in different reports. Next. Such decline is also observed during COVID-19 pandemic across the countries all over the world. Moreover, there is a fear in the healthy donor population, they might get infected. That is telling. Initially, after the essential national breakdown, it was also very difficult on the part of the blood centers to get the donors, and only a few came forward to donate. So this led to scarcity. On the top of this, the possibility of asymptomatic, pre-symptomatic infection in donors and an incorrect history of exposure that further leads to a risk of infection. And the blood centers are also reluctant to conduct off-campus voluntary blood donation camps in view of risk of community spread of the virus. And this is the major source of blood and components for all the blood centers in the world. Next. Now here comes what COVID has challenged the blood bank, how it has challenged. This pandemic COVID-19 challenges, they are basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One is blood concerning the blood donors. The other one is concerning the inventory management. The third is managing the staff. And the fourth is consumable challenges. And finally, the follow-up challenges. This is very important. for clinician point of view. Now this, how we have to respond. The blood centers, they respond, or the transfusion services, they respond. The donor recruitment in all this, go to left side, very clear. Next slide, please. Now, blood donor challenges are actually decrease in the donors because of difficulty for reaching the center, fear in the donors of getting infected, and lack of the blood donation camps. Inventory management, I'm not going to detail because there is supply chain disruption during the COVID. There has been some instances of inventory management. Staff challenge, this is the most important. Previously, thing was in blood centers, what we did, we are looking after the two aspects. One is the safety of the donor, and the second one is safety of the recipient or the patient. So now a third dimension has entered the blood center, that is the staff, safety of the staff. That is very important now. The possibility of increasing demand at the end of pandemic, keep the staff safe from the infections and staff shortages, possibility of infected staff, resulting in large number of contact quarantines. So this has caused acute shortage of staffs. Now, consumable challenges is not very important. Follow-up challenge. This is the donor follow-up and patient follow-up was a little bit difficult. So look back of the blood units that went to the patients and what happened to them. So that thing was not properly correlated because of the COVID pandemic. Next, please. Now, what are the responses? The plan to reduce community spread and the staff management. Now, this is reduce the exposure, restrict entry of unauthorized persons into the blood centers, and staff rotation on roster to decrease their exposure and reduce the risk by regular cleaning, sanitizing blood center. These are basic COVID protocols to maintain the sterility or keep the working areas free of infection. Now, healthy donor recruitment. This is important in the healthy donor recruitment. Special screening and deferral criteria is for the pandemic. So there has been certain guidelines from the LBTC or National Blood Transfusion Council that additional things should be asked to the patient, the donors, and the exemption of the donors during lockdown. So this is one point. If somebody is ready to donate, there should be some arrangement to allow him to come reach the blood centers. Now use the social media for recruitment to at least to educate the donors that if they are coming to the blood center, they are not going to be exposed to any infection there itself. Now this pre-registration of the donor, all these are there, inventory management, consumable management, convalescent plasma. So this was another response from blood center. So convalescent plasma collection and all this, and in SC Medical College, we had the fast convalescent plasma collection center. And subsequently, after use, the reports were ambiguous. Some told it is quite effective in treatment. Some told there is no difference in the outcome. So ultimately, the MCI and the central government, they have stopped the convalescent plasma recently. So we have switched over to the monoclonal antibodies packs available commercially. Next. Now the role of hospital transfusion committees. In all pandemics, there are problems. Hospital transfusion committee is an important forum where things are discussed and the solution is found out. Now, offline meetings of the committee are not to be convened to avoid gathering of person. That cannot be done. So, online person-to-person communication among the hospital transfusion committee members and the clinicians concerning possible shortage of blood and the effective blood utilization strategies can be discussed. Clinician colleagues should be requested to motivate patient family members for voluntary blood donation to follow rational transfusion and to follow the rational transfusion practice. Next. Now, reduce community spread and staff management. So, blood centers have a responsibility to keep their staff safe from the infection, as well as to maintain adequate manpower round the clock emergency service in the blood bank. Now, with the aim to reduce community spread and exposure, blood centers should plan to reduce staff, maintain area hygiene, and control flow in the premises. And for the staff management, we need to prepare a roster of staff, keeping only 50% staff for regular 7 days duty, and then quarantine them for next 7 days at home. So if somebody is exposed and comes out with positive and needs additional quarantine of the working staff, then these staff in reserve they can be called to manage the duties, and you have to run the total show with 50% of that at best. Staff who themselves or their family members have symptoms of COVID-19 are advised to stay at home in quarantine. So that affects our availability of staffs. There is also need to assign a separate dedicated staff for transfusion related testing of COVID-19 patients. So those blood centers which are serving the COVID hospitals, so they have to set up a separate lab, isolated lab, where only the cross matching of the COVID requisitions are done, and the samples and everything is specially dealt separately. So the whole blood bank staff are not exposed to infection. Next. Now the NBTC criteria for blood donor selection during the COVID-19 outbreak. So they have released a statement regarding the exclusion at-risk donors. The individuals should be deferred from blood donation for 28 days. After that, who are the individuals? Those should be deferred for 28 days. After date of departure from a country with COVID-19 in the community or area as notified by Ministry of Health and Family Affairs. Close contact exposure to a person with suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19, including those under quarantine, till there is complete recovery from a disease, including viral and radiological clearance. So all these three categories, these type of donors who have come to donate, they have to be requested to defer themselves for 28 days. Now next comes the vaccination and donor deferral. Deferral period is now 14 days following vaccination, irrespective of the type of vaccine taken in it. That is the latest guideline for India. That is the guideline given by National Protection Council. Deferral period according to American Association of Blood Banks or the US guidelines are no deferral for individuals who received a non-replicating, non-activated or messenger RNA-based COVID-19 vaccine. 14 days of waiting period for individuals who received a live attenuated viral COVID vaccine or who are uncertain about which type of vaccine was administered to them. No deferral after receipt of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. That is the FDA guideline. Now measures that should be taken to encourage the voluntary blood donor organizers and the blood donors. So an appeal to be made to all voluntary blood donor organizers about shortage and continuous need of blood component during pandemic. So we don't hold caps. So there should be regular flow of small number of donors to the blood bank. They are to be informed about the steps taken by the blood center to ensure the prevention of the possible spread of SARS-CoV-2 infection to the donors in the donor area. So they need to be reassured on this aspect. The patient's family members and friends have to be requested to come forward and donate blood in this type of time of crisis, because other donors are not mostly available many times. So donor families, we depend on them to come forward. To relieve the anxiety and apprehension in the general population regarding blood donation process, mass media can be utilized to spread information regarding the safety measures being taken to prevent spread of SARS virus infection in the blood centers. Now the implementation of supplementary health questionnaire, the modified, we have got a health questionnaire for all the donors. Now it is a little modified and addition has been made, and the modified blood questionnaire is advised by the NBTC is being used. The addendums include questions regarding donors or close contacts travel and contact history with a confirmed or suspected case of COVID, and symptoms of active infection, if any. In case of positive history and symptoms, donors should be referred to nearest flu clinic. Advice and instructions for the voluntary blood donor organization, individual blood donors. Now, donor information, as you know, I've already stressed that there will be circulated blood donor organizations so that they can communicate with voluntary blood donors, their members. Now, the voluntary blood donor organization are also to be informed to promote self-deferral of the donors in case of symptom or history of contact, so they can self-defer themselves instead of directly coming down to blood bank and getting deferred here. Now, non-essential voluntary blood donor organization members and the persons accompanying the donors, they have to be requested to keep their numbers at a minimum and don't enter the blood centers working areas. Next. Higher age group of donors, now our age of collection is 18 to 60. Now 55 to 60, this age, we should better avoid if the patient is giving any history or any hints that there is some comorbidity. So they should be strictly avoided in this crisis. Defense service personnel of different paramilitary forces, they should be motivated to keep ready. So once this pandemic is over and blood demand increases and donor mobilization is not there, we can fill up the gap with their help. To reduce mass gathering, an appointment system is to be established to the donors by giving specific time for blood donation. So if you give an appointment to the voluntary donors, so in this 1 hour, we invite only 10 donors. So that is quite helpful to prevent the, keep them safe during the pandemic. Now, COVID-19 testing of blood donors has not been recommended by NBTC in India. Blood donors are to be counseled to inform the concerned blood center in case of any symptoms of COVID or positive COVID test up to 18 days post donation. So after the donor leaves the blood bank after a donation, he is requested or counseled to report to the blood bank of any of these events. As per the national policy by the NBTC, the blood unit collected from such a donor must be recalled and discarded with all precautions. If such a blood component has been transfused to any patient, it should be reported to the patient's attending physician as well as National Hemovigilance System. Now, it is the duty of the blood center. If they come across any feedback from the donor about this, they have to keep the concerned clinician informed immediately and officially report it to the National Hemovigilance System. Next. Now, the managing blood donation during the pandemic. Only blood donors are allowed to enter donation area. No child, no other person. All this should be, they should not be allowed. Blood donors should be checked upon arrival to confirm they don't have flu-like symptom. So, by the laser thermal scanners or all this should be avoided. No-touch technique is now used. If donors have any symptoms of fever, cough, or cold, they should be deferred. Donor must wear face masks, sanitize hands, and may wear protective gloves. That is optional, not mandatory, when they arrive at the donation site itself. Next, social distancing and blood donation. Limit the assembling of blood donors, not more than 4 at a time in a donor reception area. Strict restriction to be enforced to limit number of people attending the blood donation premises at one time. The distance of at least 1 meter should be kept between donors present in the donation area. Donor couches and chairs to be kept at least 2 meters apart. If in case these are all fixed, then every alternate chair is to be kept empty. So these are all general things. Sanitizing measures in the blood bank. So all these things used during the blood collection, they should be clean with 1% hypochlorite or alcohol-based sanitizer after each donation. And all the doors and knobs, etc. of the blood center, that should be in every hour, that should be sanitized. Fumigation of the donation area should be undertaken every night. That is usually done every week. So this should be done every night. Precaution by the staff with the outdoor collection drives or in-house donations. The hospital blood bank staff, they should use alcohol-based hand sanitizers, and N95 mask is a must and mandatory. And now we advocate the use of double masks. Next. Now these are some Indian experiences, publications regarding their experience in blood bank. This I have separately just given the title. This is from Calcutta, and the brief abstract is that I was talking about the drop in blood donation and blood component preparation and blood issue in COVID period is observed to be 51%, 49%, and 49%. So nearly 50% drop in general of different blood has been observed in the blood bank, blood center. In the COVID period, increased wastage of blood component was observed, which was statistically significant. The mean number of staff per day in the COVID period was in their blood center 9.67, whereas in the pre-COVID period it was 18.3. So it was a drop of 50%. Now sometimes we have managed our own blood bank with 30% staff, because when 3 or 4 staff have been quarantined, it was very difficult for us. The mean work time per day for the staff was calculated to be 10.77 hours. So longer working hours with the less staff, you have to request them to put up longer working hours. The major causes of failure to donate blood were fear for the COVID infection, and lack of transportation during lockdown period. So these are some other papers. COVID-19 pandemic response to challenges by blood transfusion service in India is a review article. Next, impact of COVID-19 pandemic on blood transfusion services at a rural-based district hospital blood bank. Next, impact of novel coronavirus disease and lockdown on packed red blood cell inventory management and experience of testing tertiary care oncology center in Western India. Next, voluntary blood donation challenges in COVID-19 pandemic Indian scenario. So he is Sri Chitra Tirunal Institute Transfusion Medicine head, and he is the president of Indian Society of Transfusion Medicine. Now, planning the blood center operation during the pandemic, this is my concluding slide. Blood transfusion services are expected to provide an uninterrupted blood supply during pandemic. That is our responsibility. So this is always, we are thinking of this. The plan of action has to be started at an early stage before community spread, so that supply can be made. Mass media plays an essential role to make it possible with a combined effort from the Clean Science Act. Blood centers should plan strategies to respond to challenges generated during a pandemic, which focus on the shortage, wastage, rational use of blood and components in a cost-effective manner. So now I have to thank you and just highlight here that I have repeatedly used the word blood center, blood center. That is because in India now the blood bank word is deleted, it is outdated. The government of India, the licensing bodies, Drugs Controller General, they've renamed blood banks as blood center, and this should be used widely. And the signages of the blood bank also need to be changed to blood center. Thank you, sir.
I think moderator should have the next observation. The moderator. I think Dr. Ravindra Kumar Mishra.
Unmute. Please unmute.
Unmute, please unmute.
Dr. Mishra, please unmute.
You are not audible, sir. Please unmute.
He is not able to understand that possibly he has to unmute. Professor Mishra, I think you have to unmute to be heard. Please unmute your audio. Yeah, now it's okay.
Yes, sir. Now I am audible.
Yes,
Yeah.
Actually, it is a nice presentation. Blood, as you know, it is quite essential for thalassemia, hemophilia patients, and also it is essential for other diseases like cancer patients, road accidents. So these things remain. But as you know, the pandemic has drastically reduced the blood collection due to many factors we all know. So how to tackle it? Is it by hospital transfusion committee or by any government guideline? I want to know. I want to know from Professor Pati sir that can it be decided by hospital?
Pandemic is of a short duration, and the experience of different blood center is not much. So it depends on each blood center to be innovative and find out their own way how to pull or invite or get the donors into blood bank, or how to conduct small camps, blood donation camp voluntarily without much gathering. So 10 to 20 donations per day, you can go in a vehicle, limited staff, observing all the COVID protocols and collect that small numbers and like this. But that is again, there is a problem because we are managing already the center with less staff and diverting the staff for collection outdoor. That is a problem, and we have to balance between the two. So it is actually, there is no definite guideline. There is no definite guideline, rules and regulations. You have to find out your own innovative way how to manage the blood center and make blood components available to the essential transfusions.
So thank you.
If any other
sir.
question, if any other question is there, one can ask, we can go for another 5-6 minutes. But please make the question, no prelude, no compliment, only the question.
Can I ask, sir?
Yeah.
Any experience of stem cell transplantation in Odisha or East India, sir?
No, is it related? I am not very sure. See, for COVID, bone marrow transplant you are talking about.
Sir, stem cell
I
transplantation.
think, no, stem cell transplantation for COVID. You mean to say
Yeah, yeah.
post-COVID patient?
Yeah,
Professor Kar. Yeah. Professor Raki.
Yeah, actually, what I have come across this mesenchymal stem cell, which are the registered trials, were mostly from China and USA and few from European countries. I did not come across any studies from India on mesenchymal stem cell therapy in COVID from India as such. So
So,
I am not sure if this therapy has been registered or if there is any center.
Only one question related to that. Has the WHO recommended or allowed the mesenchymal stem cell therapy in post-COVID problem?
Sir, what I have seen is these studies which have done, they have got approval. They basically have to be cleared through the clinical trials, and it has been mostly on compassionate use in severe COVID-19.
No, I'm talking about WHO.
It is not a recommended therapy to the
No.
best of my.
Has it acknowledged? Has it acknowledged? Because for the trial and therapeutic trial, it is a national affair. It is not a WHO affair. So you have told that it has been done in China and some European countries.
And USA. The maximum trials are from these
USA.
places.
But
Yes, sir.
WHO has not come to picture as yet.
I haven't come across, sir, as a guideline
Okay.
in any of the.
Any other questions? Quick
yeah,
questions.
maybe in India we have not taken up till now, what I feel.
Maybe, sir, because as such, it would come under the regulatory bodies for having a stem cell facility which offers therapy. So I think it is offered as a therapy in some other regenerative medicine, but in COVID, I didn't come across.
Yeah, we have stem cell therapy in different
Yes, sir.
centers. Yeah,
Yes,
but in COVID, I don't think any data. I think Professor Jenna can give some highlights, sir. Dean, sir.
Stem cell, no, it's not a stem cell therapy. Don't mix it up. Say pluripotent or that hematopoietic stem cell is a different thing. Whatever now we are discussing, the mesenchymal stem cell as a regenerative medicine which has been used in many clinical settings. Now the Professor Raki has told it's a potential uses in post-COVID complications or during the COVID. But I am a critic of the mesenchymal therapy because it is a contentious issue. Even also as a form of the regenerative medicine also, it's never a standard enough. It is still in an experimental therapy with many questions to be answered. And so also in COVID situation also, it is a highly experimental therapy. Only in 5 to 10 cases, some trials has been done. I think we have to wait to give any comment based on any evidence for that so far.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Sir, there are a few questions in the chat box. Sir,
Please go ahead. Please go ahead.
Sir, Dr. Raki, it's from Dr. Devashish Mishra. Any evidence-based study regarding MSC therapy and its utility for COVID treatment in India?
No, that he has already answered. He has already answered that.
Actually, I have typed into the chat box.
He has already answered that. Next question.
Also, who are the patients selected from MSC therapy?
Most of the trials, it's severe COVID-19 patients who have not responded to other forms of therapy. In most of the trials, that has been the. I did answer them in the chat, I think.
Yes. Thank you.
Dr. Devashish, you want to ask something more? If no more questions, I think I have few informations in fact. A few information that we are being monitored by independent referee. We are being observed by independent referee. And at the end of it, there is going to be an award for the best performing department in CME. That is one. Secondly, there are different criteria laid down. As usual, whatever happens as regard the selection of the best performing department in the presentation, the criteria has been fixed. You know, there are many criteria. It's common criteria. I don't have to say that. And the award will go on the day of our kicking start of the 75 for 75 program. So that will go with the initial function. I take the opportunity of inviting all faculties who have been contributing in the academic deliberations in our CME, pre-platinum jubilee CME, to please become a member of the SCBM. We have got a registered society now in the name of SCBM, that is SCB Medical College Alumni Association. You are all proud alumni of our institution. So please try to register yourself. And beyond that, I will say that it was a fantastic talk. Everything is new concept. And you know, it is always a concept. We had a concept of convalescent plasma therapy. Ultimately, it did not make it. And gradually it was withdrawn. WHO was skeptical about it. And in line with that, Government of India also with using convalescent plasma therapy. Similarly, this is another new area of mesenchymal stem cell therapy. The time will prove its utility, but as I rightly pointed out, that it is at the experimental stage, and we have a lot to do before you can think that it is beneficial and it is clinically applicable. Now, as regard what Professor Pati has told, you know, he has been associated with the blood center, the new term that is coined by Government of India. He has been associated with the blood center for decades, and we have got enriched from their experience. I have only one thing which really haunts me. I think needs clarification. It is not a blood-borne disease. COVID-19 is not a blood-borne disease. It is an aerosol disease. So why are you so skeptical about collecting a blood from a donor who do not have symptoms? The only fear is that he might be a carrier, asymptomatic carrier. Can we think of, this is suggestion and this I want that somebody should answer. Can we think that like we are operating patient, there cannot be more proximity for longer hours than operation? Can we think of getting the COVID test done, RT-PCR test done prior to donation, so that the safety protocol is maintained and we do not have lack in donation? Because that is the biggest challenge during this time. Professor Pati, please.
It is all depends on the national body, that is the National Blood Transfusion Council. So even when we are doing the high mandatory TTI tests, HIV, HBsAg, HCV, hepatitis and malaria and syphilis, there also there is no mandatory pre-transfusion testing of donors. We don't test. So that is not advised. So test after collection and segregate and discard those units when they are confirmed to be seropositive. So similarly in COVID, there have been strictly no guideline that we should undertake a pre-donation testing. Now, if the another part is if you do a pre-donation testing, the donor will get the swab submitted one day. The report he will get the same day evening or the next day, and the next day the donor may not turn up. So the thing is, when the donor is available, you screen as far to the best of your ability and collect the image. So the donor may not give you time to come visit the blood center at another time. That is one important aspect. I think
because in our protocols or in our hospital, when we are admitting a patient, we are definitely doing a RT-PCR. We are doing a rat test in the OPD. If it is negative, then we are doing RT-PCR after admission, putting him in isolation. Simultaneously, also we are testing the attendant who are going to stay with them, because this is the COVID protocol, because we don't want that the COVID should spread. So similarly, most of the donors are the attendants. In surgical practice, most of the donors are the attendants. They are already screened. for the COVID by RT-PCR test. So similarly, donors, voluntary donors, we have to encourage them, we have to motivate them. It is the interest of the society that the COVID is not spread. This is what my submission was, and I wanted some viewpoint. Yeah.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
My concern is, sir, in large scale outdoor voluntary blood donation, your suggestion is a good, sir. For small in-house collection, rat test may be feasible. But in case of voluntary outdoor collection, where minimum 60 to 50 to 100 units are collected, this is not feasible.
No, I fully agree with you. RAT is a very quick test and easily available test, RAT test. So RAT can be done. At least we can screen out, if not all, how we can screen out. So anyway, these are food for thoughts. I think one should always think about it because, you know, not having blood is more problem than having a COVID contracted because of donation.
The only thing is that we have to take sufficient personal precautions and sanitizer.
Right.
And some social distancing.
Right.
Before collection.
Any other observation before we go on to the next event of conveying our gratitude and thanks to both the speakers and the moderators?
Sir, any incidents of transfusion transmitted COVID reported yet?
No, nothing yet.
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Professor Das, Professor Bidut Das, he might be able to add something. Or our moderators, if they are still logged in, because we are already 5:10, otherwise you'll go for the next formality. My request to all the HOD, please circulate about the program at least a day before. That is what the first thing. And secondly, please communicate to the dean in detail about the speakers beforehand. So that I can communicate in a much better way than what I have been doing. Now I hand over to Professor Pankaj Parida.
Yes. Now I request Dr. Smita Mahapatra, Associate Professor, Department of Transfusion Medicine, SCB MCS Cuttack, to give both of thanks, but the one clarification. Invitation, actually we have loaded 1 week back and that was too early, so that again we have loaded today.
I'll just put lightly, public memory is short, doctor's memory is never there. So you have to post it continuously for 2-3 days. You know, at the end of it, it is a departmental program which is highlighted. I am telling for the other department, that is what my appeal is. Please go ahead.
A matter of professional honor, but also a personal privilege to present the vote of thanks on behalf of the Department of Transfusion Medicine, SCB Medical College, Cuttack. Organizing a CME in times of pandemic with such wide participation is indeed a sign of blessings and good wishes of our esteemed participants have for this department. The first speaker of the day, Dr. Rakhi Kar, Professor Pathology, JIPMER Puducherry, left us all spellbound with a conceptual clarity, eloquence, and insight on the subject. Thank you very much, Dr. Rakhi, for addressing your alma mater as an alumni and for giving us your precious time. We will cherish your participation. The second speaker of the day, respected Professor Dr. Vibhudendu Pati sir, gave a brilliant address with a practical focus and clear many concepts. Sir, your presentation will be a guiding light for us. Thank you very much. Our sincere thanks to the moderators today, respected Professor Dr. Ravindra Kumar Mishra, HOD Transfusion Medicine, MK City Medical College, Parampur, and Professor Dr. Priyanka Sanu, HOD Hematology and Hemato-Oncology, IMS and some Medical College, Bhubaneswar. for wonderful coordination and for your strategic moderation of your sessions, which have made this CME a success. We are proud to announce that both the moderators are distinguished alumni of this institute. Our respected patron and the real inspiration behind the CME is our Dean and Principal, Medical Luminary and eminent educationist, Professor Dr. Datteshwar Hota. His contribution to this department as a guiding light and mentor need no words. Sir, we shall forever remain grateful to you for your kind blessings. This CME has become richer and more fruitful with active participation of all our respective professors, HODs, other senior faculty members, senior residents, and postgraduate students. Please continue to encourage us. Special thanks to guest participants from JIPMER, from AIIMS Bhubaneswar, IMS SAM, AMRI Bhubaneswar, KEM Mumbai, SGPGI, Lucknow, Kolkata Medical College, and Chitra Tribhuvan Institute of Medical Science, Trivandrum, and so many institutes. Sirs and madams, your participation has made this CME truly a national level CME. Our heartfelt thanks to our professor and HOD, Professor Dr. Pankaj Parida, for his constant support, guidance, and directions. My special thanks to all the senior residents, the postgraduate students, and also to Shri Devashish Panitai for all the technical help and infrastructure support. Thank you so much.
Tomorrow we have from the Department of Ophthalmology, request all faculty to please log in at 4 o'clock. And we will again have another very interesting deliberation tomorrow. Thanks to all of you.
Meeting for today.